I can still recall the way the overhead lights hummed that night, old fluorescent tubes flickering in the drafty ceiling of our church hall, as if even they weren't sure they wanted to be there. The air was perfumed with instant coffee and something savory from earlier, last scraps of a potluck clinging to plastic tables. There were folding chairs arranged in lazy rows, and people sitting on them, faces I'd known since childhood grown heavy with the years, weathered and familiar, but somehow sharper in that moment. It was supposed to be just another monthly congregation meeting, the kind where we argued over budgets and the right color for the stained glass, but word had got out about me. Someone must have seen my letter on the kitchen table, the acceptance letter to that photography course in Melbourne, and in a matter of hours I had become subject to what they all called a discussion, which was really just them waiting to take the floor one by one and tell me what a fool I was. Mum was the first to speak, voice tight like she'd been holding it in for weeks. "Is this really necessary, Jamie? Does anyone in this family ever get anywhere by taking photos?" Her words sat in the air, heavy as damp wool. I tried to rehearse my answer, but it shriveled in my throat. I scanned the faces, my Uncle Leon with his twitchy eyebrow, Mrs. Hartnell from next door, her dentures clicking against her tongue, and my cousin Emily, who looked embarrassed just to be there. Leon let out a short, humorless laugh. "A camera doesn't pay the rent. Give it 6 months, you'll be back here scraping dishes at Bernie's with the rest of us." A ripple of snickers followed, not malicious so much as practiced, like a habit they'd all learned growing up in this block of Redfern, where dreams were best left unspoken if you didn't want them trampled under the muddy boots of realism. Someone called out from the side, "What's a photo worth anyway? Who needs more bloody sunsets?" Mrs. Hartnell piped up, "I saw your Instagram. Filters don't feed families, love." I focused on a knot in the wooden floorboards just in front of my shoe, breathing slow so I wouldn't let them see the tremble. I tried to keep my spine straight, feigning indifference, dignity my only shield, but inside it strung. These were people who watched me grow, patched my scrapes, cheered at netball games. I wanted to shout that photos matter, that they catch slivers of truth no words can touch, but all I managed was a quiet, "It's what I need to do." The pastor, sweet Mr. Barrow, cleared his throat. Now, Jamie's got to live his own life, hasn't he? We should support at least." But the rest drowned him out, a swell of muttering and shaking heads. I left early, blaming a headache. At home, Mum was scraping plates in silence. She didn't meet my gaze, just said, "Your father would have said the same. It's not too late to change your mind." But it was. I packed my bag, slipped my camera inside, and left before sunrise, heart raw but a scrap of dignity left to clutch as I crossed the turnstile at Central Station. Melbourne was cold, full of slick trams and graffiti and people who didn't care where you were from. I learned to disappear in crowds, to catch the way autumn mist laced through alleyways, how strangers reached for each other in gentle, wordless ways. My camera became my second heart, pulsing with each click. There were hungry weeks, days when my bank balance barely scraped 2 digits, nights spent in dim hostel rooms, trying to sell photos online for pocket change. I worked every odd job, from cafe shifts to cleaning pigeon turds off statues for student galleries. I grew calluses on my fingers and shadows under my eyes, convincing myself the ache in my chest was just the city's chill, not a hollowed-out loneliness. Classes demanded everything. I learned how to chase light, how to frame a story in a single image, how to wait for rain or laughter or heartbreak to show itself. My teachers were half absent, distracted by their own portfolios, but all sharp edges and honesty when they looked at my work. "This has grit," one said once, sliding a print across the desk. "But what do you want to say?" For weeks I didn't know, just kept shooting. City buskers, lonely park benches, the subtle symmetry of strangers standing shoulder to shoulder in a winter drizzle. But it was the homesickness that finally guided my lens, a longing that bled into each composition, something about the way light fell on tired faces or how hope clung to hands at train station platforms. By the end of the course, I'd pieced together a portfolio, submitted on shaky confidence to every magazine, blog, and competition I could find. Most never replied, some sent simple rejections. Not the direction we're looking for. The ones that did send a few kind words, I tacked to my wall, using them to anchor myself against the constant, gnawing self-doubt. Then, almost a year in, an email sandwiched between car insurance spam and a rent overdue notice. It was from the Northern Lights Collective, a photojournalism agency in Sydney. I'd applied half out of hope, half out of desperation. We'd like you to join our team for an upcoming project on urban resilience. If interested, call us. I read the message 5 times before daring to reply. The project was intense, weeks of documentation, late nights on assignment, capturing stories of families weathering change in neighborhoods just like the one I'd left. It was like photographing pieces of home without the sting of being recognized by old neighbors. My eyes sharpened, my voice grew through the lens. The stories I captured didn't just pass through magazines. They started arguments, open discussions, were shared by the people in them. I won a local award, then a national one. I was sent to France on assignment, then Singapore. My photos appeared in print, on city billboards, in digital features. Each box-ticking milestone I'd call Mum, short chats at first, then longer. For years she'd stay neutral, as if waiting for the real failure to arrive so she could say, "I told you so." But with each award, each glowing mention, I sensed a sliver of pride in her silence. Sydney called me home for a solo exhibition. The gallery was in the inner west, not so far from Redfern. I hesitated for days before agreeing, afraid the city would swallow me in old shame. But the curator insisted, convinced my images of life in struggle belonged most in the place I learned to see. The exhibition ran for 2 weeks. Photos I'd taken, gritty, gentle, honest, were framed on white walls, each a fragment of love and loss. Crowds came, some faces blurred with time, some strangers, a few old schoolmates stunned by the plaques under each print. The press sent a reviewer, the story ran in the Sydney Morning Herald. My phone buzzed with messages I barely knew how to answer, and then, like all things, it circled back. The church community was celebrating its anniversary. The committee wanted to show local talent, a phrase that made me wince. "Mum rung me, you'll come, won't you? Only right." So I did. I booked a flight, packed my camera, and rehearsed smiles in front of the hotel mirror. Walking into the church hall was a blend of memory and strange newness. The paint had chipped a little more, banners were faded, the same faint trace of instant coffee and polish in the air. But the crowd was older now, some stooped, a few faces missing. Mum hovered at the door, pulled me into a brief, brittle hug. "You made it, Jamie. That means something, you know." I nodded, afraid my voice would break. Inside, they'd hung a massive screen at the front. The pastor, Mr. Barrow, stooped and silvering now clapped my shoulder. "Biggest turnout we've had in years," he said, voice thick with pride borrowed from somewhere. The seats filled. My old crew in their usual cluster, Leon, Mrs. Hartnell, cousin Emily picking at her cuticles. The same rhythm of chatter buzzed, low and expectant. The committee called me to the front. My hands shook, so I slipped them in my jacket pockets. I said a few words about chasing light, about hope, about seeing things most people miss. I tried to sound steady, but I caught Leon's smirk in the third row and felt the old fear tighten around my ribs. Then the room darkened, the first slide lit the wall, a hush fell. On screen, a portrait of an elderly Vietnamese woman in a Sarai Hills kitchen, sunlight painting her lined face, hands kneading dough. Then 2 young brothers tangled in laughter, chasing pigeons through rain at Central Station. An Aboriginal father cradling his son, both weary-eyed, both defiant. Each image was a scene from Sydney, raw but reverent. My narration was sparse, just enough to frame the stories. By the third photo, a silence had settled, deeper than embarrassment. Mrs. Hartnell's mouth hung open, silent for the first time I could recall. Emily's eyes glimmered. Leon clicked his tongue but said nothing. The images spun, the aftermath of storms, hands building new garden beds in scorched earth, teenagers leaping graffiti-tagged fences. Each photo a hymn to a city that spits dreams out but sometimes lets them blossom. At the end, a final image, Redfern at sunset, shot from above, rooftops glowing gold. I'd taken it on a whim weeks earlier, the city's sprawl soft as a quilt. Underneath, my own caption, "Home is the story you fight for." The lights clinked back on, no one moved, then a slow, uncertain applause. It grew, awkward at first, then real. Afterwards people came, some with watery eyes, some awkward with praise. "I never knew Sydney like that," one said. "You made us proud," another whispered. Leon sidled over, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't think you had it in you," he said, staring at his shoes. Emily hugged me, sniffling. Mrs. Hartnell squeezed my hand, wordless for once. It wasn't triumph, not loudly. It was a slow undoing of shame, a return with proof they could not shake. The ones who'd mocked could see it etched in light and struggle, real as breath. Afterwards I sat on the church steps, the night crisp around me. Mum joined, her hand rough in mine. "I was wrong," she said quietly, "about all of it." We watched the late traffic drift, warmth spreading through my chest not just of pride but of peace. I'd left once with nothing but a camera and a stubborn streak of dignity. I'd come back not to show them they were wrong, but to show them what I'd seen and somehow that changed everything. And as the church lights dimmed behind us, for the first time coming home felt less like surrender and more like coming full circle, bearing gifts.